Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our event on Tunisia and the crisis of authoritarianism in the Arab world. My name is Nader Hashemi. I'm the director of the Al Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding here at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. And it's a huge honor for us to host and to welcome Moncef Marzouki, the first democratically elected president of Tunisia. He became president after the 2011 Tunisian Arab Spring Revolution, where he was elected to the presidency by the Tunisian National Constituent Assembly. During his time in office, he embarked on a mission to open the doors of the presidential palace through campaigns of transparency, participative democracy, and by encouraging a safe public space for civil society to flourish. During his mandate, Moncef Marzouki was a voice for social and revolutionary activism, advocating civil rights, the curtailment of the security apparatus, and promoting economic development. He also demonstrated a firm commitment to a political principle that is in very short supply in the Arab and Islamic world, and that is building coalitions with groups and organizations across ideological lines. Now, of course, if you're following events in Tunisia, the picture is very dark. In 2011, there was a political coup that ended roughly a decade of democracy in Tunisia, and things have gone from bad to worse with the consolidation of power around the president, Kais Saied, who in everything he says and does reminds me of the politics and behavior of the late Muammar Gaddafi. There's been a mass arrest of political prisoners, a crushing of civil society, and a deep cloud of darkness has engulfed Tunisia, in many ways reflecting broader trends in the Arab world. I've said many times, and I'll repeat it again, these are the dark days of history for the Arab and Islamic world. And the fact that the democratic experiment in Tunisia has been overturned is just a reminder of that sad reality. It's important also to point out that Dr. Marzouki has been sentenced by the Tunisian government to 4 years in prison for high treason. And that is, in my view, a mark of distinction, because when an authoritarian leader who reminds you of Muammar Gaddafi sentences you to high treason for your democratic commitments and your human rights commitments, that's a badge of honor that he should wear very proudly. He lives in exile today in Paris, where he continues to fight for the return of democracy in his country and the Arab world. He's been here in the United States, I think, for about a week, and it's an honor to have him here to speak with us today about these issues. The agreed sort of format that we have is that Dr. Marzouki will make an initial presentation of about 10 minutes. We will have a public conversation. We will turn it over to the audience for questions and answers. We are being live streamed, so we'll try to get some questions in on Zoom, and then we want to wrap things up by 1:15 at the latest. So please join me in welcoming to the School of Foreign Service, Moncef Marzouki.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Professor Nader Hashemi, for this invitation, and thank you for the Center of Muslim and Christian Understanding. Well, I will try to be very brief. About the Arab Spring, the democratic revolution in the Arab world, everybody knows how it ends. Very few people know why, and nobody knows what will be the future. So allow me to, to give some remark about the three levels of this problem. Everybody knows how it ended. You know that it had the Arab Spring ended in civil war in Libya, civil war in Yemen, coup in Egypt, also in constitutional coup in Tunisia. So it seems this is about the first wave, because very few people know that, in fact, the revolution of 2011 was the first wave. We have had second wave in 2016, 17, 18, 19 in Lebanon, Algeria, Iraq, and Sudan. So the first wave failed, and the second wave failed too. We still have dictatorship in Algeria. We still have dictatorship course, in Syria, and our dictatorship returned to Tunisia. Of course, we have harsh dictatorship in Egypt, more violent and more corrupt than the dictatorship of Mubarak. So it seems that this is the landscape, fair of everything. Now, very few people know the reason why we have had this failure. Of course, there are different situations. Tunisia is different. Syria is different than Yemen, etc., etc. So I'm not going to focus. I will try to focus on the only country I know very well, which is, of course, Tunisia. And even in the complex set of different causes, I will try to focus on the most important internal cause and the most important external cause. For me, it was obvious from the beginning that the most important thing in Tunisia after the revolution was the high level of expectation of the Tunisian people, mainly about social and economic development. And people at that moment, after the first days of the revolution, they thought that everything would be okay. You know? They would get freedom, they would get social and economic development, etc., etc. Unfortunately, you know, when you, after revolution, you have a high level of political instability. And when you have a high level of political instability, you have always the economic, it's at standstill. This is why I said when I was elected, look, we have to hurry up, because otherwise we will face a lot of challenges. And unfortunately, we needed about 3 years of time, you know, to have the constitution, to discuss a good constitution and to set up the democratic institution, etc., etc. And 3 years, that was too long for the population, waiting for, you know, for economic relief. And I can say that even because of the political instability, the economic situation worsened, because imagine that you have a country, a revolutionary country, living on tourism. Of course, very few tourists would come to this country because they know that there is political instability. And when you have this political instability, you have always very few investment from inside the country and very few foreign investment. So what happens during this revolution is that the economic situation of the population worsens, and people will say, okay, we are free, we can talk, etc., etc. But what about cost of living? What about jobs? What about? So this was probably the most important thing that it can explain how in Tunisia it failed, but it was not, of course, the only reason. The second reason, the most important second reason, I would say, is the external reason. There was a veto against the Arab Spring by the dictatorship of the region, mainly dictatorship of Iran, the dictatorship of the Emiratis and the Saudi and the Algerian. They were extremely afraid of this wave of democratization in the world, in the Arab world, and they were very, very afraid that they would have to face the same challenges. So they put a lot of money, you know, to pervert the very mechanism of democracy itself in Tunisia. You cannot imagine how much money they put in a corrupt political party, in corrupt media, etc. And those corrupt media, those corrupt political media, played an important role in the failure of the Arab Spring in Tunisia. We have also to deal with terrorist attacks, and we do know that those terrorist attacks, many of them came from Algeria, because the Algerian regime was extremely afraid of what's happening in Tunisia. He was right, because don't forget that in 2018 and 19, there was a new wave of, you know, people taken to the street for more than 50 weeks, you know, claiming more freedom and less corruption, etc. So the Algerian regime was very right to be afraid of this. So when you have this combination between internal factor and external factor, the veto and the problems of the revolution itself, you can understand why it was so easy for the counter revolution to come back and to win the election in Tunisia, or to lead a coup military coup in Egypt. In fact, the situation is, once again, is very different from Syria, where you have the impact of the Russian. Also, the Russians were very afraid of the Arab Spring. And they were right in one way, because don't forget that what happened in Ukraine in 2016 was part of this, this wave of hope of democracy in the world, etc. So the Russian, they intervened militarily in Syria, and they have done something we never forgive them, because what's happened against the Syrian people was a real crime against humanity. So when you see that the fact that all the dictatorship of the region, they managed to stop this wave of democratization, when you see the internal factors, you can understand what happened and why this Arab Spring has failed. I would say that, in fact, this is what I am repeating. We have lost the battle, but we didn't lose the war. And now I come to I will finish with the third level of the problem, which means that, okay, now we have had failure of the revolution, but we have had also the failure of the counter-revolution, because Egypt now is a failed state. In Tunisia, also it's failed state. The economy is in extremely poor condition, and the people would probably take to the street very soon. So nobody knows exactly what would happen in the next future in this region of the world. If you ask me the question, do you think that what could be the outcome of all this? Frankly, I don't know. In fact, I have some hypotheses. I think that there are two different situations. The situation of countries like the Emirati and the Saudi, they have a lot of money. The government has a lot of money because of the oil revenue, so they can let's say they can do something so the people will keep quiet because they have enough to eat and so forth. But how long does it take? I don't know, because people are not. The Arab Revolution was the main slogan of the revolution was dignity and freedom. It means that human beings that don't accept just to have cars and to have jobs, etc., they also badly needs human dignity and freedom. This is why I expect that even in the rich country of the Gulf, it's a matter of time. I don't know how long it would take, maybe decades before people take to the streets saying, look, fed up with corruption, fed up with repression, even if we have cars and jobs, etc., we want freedom and dignity. In the poorest country of the region, like Tunisia, Egypt, that counter-revolution, which is now in charge, have nothing to offer. Nothing. The economic situation is worsening, no more freedom, etc., etc. So we're going to have a new, probably, wave of revolution. I always say that the best image, in fact, to understand the situation of the region is not is Arab volcanoes. Arab volcanoes rather than Arab Spring. Arab volcanoes means that you have volcanoes, and that the volcanoes, you as a politicians are like geologists. They don't know when this volcano will burst, but they do know that the volcano will burst. When, nobody knows. So I don't know exactly what would happen in Tunisia next month or next year, but I'm expecting that there would be a new burst. And I'm very much afraid of the fact that the second wave of revolution could be less peaceful than the first. I tried myself, with Rashid al-Nushi and many other leaders from both Islamist and secular strength. We really did our best so to keep this democratic revolution as peaceful as possible. This is why we didn't have, maybe it was an error, I don't know. We didn't have tough position against the former regime, etc. But I'm afraid that the next the revolution that will be much more violent, because there is so much hatred within the population and so much fear in the government, within the government, and that I'm afraid that maybe the next wave would be very, very violent. I would do all my best to prevent this violence. I would do all my best to move, not only me, a lot of democratic leaders, so that the next wave would be as peaceful as possible. And I hope that this time we are going to succeed in building this democratic state we are dreaming of for many years. I always say to my young fellows, sometimes they are a bit disappointed of this saying that, hey, we failed. I said, no, we didn't fail, because imagine our parents, our grandparents fighting for the independence against the colonialism. It took them eight decades, you know, and they have lost a lot of battles. But at the end, Tunisia became an independent. We have exactly the same problem now. My generation and the next generation, we have to fight maybe 2 or 3 decades more than to have what they call the second independence. For me, democracy is, I call it the second independence, which means that the first independence we got rid of the colonial state, oppressive colonial state, and now with the second independence, we are going to get rid of the internal colonial state, if I might say, because really, in countries like Egypt, Egypt is occupied by its own army. It's the occupation. It's not an external occupation, but it's an internal occupation, and it is a brutal, corrupt occupation. And I can say that for Syrian, being under the French occupation was much more easier than to be under the occupation of the regime of Bashar al-Assad. So I will end here. My last sentence would be, once again, we have lost the battle, but we are going to win the war. And I always say to the people saying, hey, the Arab Spring is over, say, no, the Arab Spring is at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those observations and for your spirit of optimism. Even though the picture looks very dark, I think it's important that we don't lose hope and give up, because that's exactly what the supporters of authoritarianism want us to do. Let's look at Tunisia a little bit. My view, you touched upon this, but I want you to say more. The failure of democracy in Tunisia is largely an economic story. You know, people say you can't eat democracy. Let's say Qais Said is overturned next week, and democracy is restored, but the underlying economic conditions of mass poverty, pauperization, youth unemployment remain the same. How can we be sure that this cycle that we've seen of democracy, authoritarianism doesn't keep going as long as those underlying economic conditions remain the same? So that begs the question, how do we change those underlying economic conditions? What ideas do you have? What role can the international community play to help changing the underlying economic conditions? Because unless that changes, you know, it'll be very difficult to sustain democracy. I mean, one of the theories of democracy is that you need a sizable middle class. When the middle class shrinks, democracy is very difficult to sustain.
Well, I think part of the responsibilities are ours. We Tunisians have to build a stable political system. And this is why when I was in charge, I always asked the political class, look, we have to hurry up. Stop talking about Islam and democracy. Stop talking about what else. We badly need political stability. So if we don't offer political stability, there will never be investment from outside the country or investment from the country itself. So our part of responsibility is, once again, to hurry up to have political stability, which means that stop worrying about identity, stop worrying about Islam, stop worrying about such and such problem, dealing only with economic problem. This is our part of responsibility. But fortunately, there is also part of responsibility of our Western friends, because the debt is the main problem. You cannot imagine the debt. We can do any economic progress with this huge amount of debt to the different countries, and much of this money, has fled the country. This is what should be. I remember that I have had a lot of discussion with François Hollande and the president of Germany. A lot of people saying, look, you do know that a lot of money, our money is in your banks. So please help us to get this money. I said, no. Here you have to go to the judiciary. Go to the judiciary. We know that you have a lot of money, but we cannot deal with the judiciary. It will take a long time. We need now the solution. No. And I remember also I asked this French government and Germany, look, what about relief our debt because we badly need this money, you know, to no, we cannot, etc. So this is how it happened. And I try to understand, to explain to them, look, if you want not to have these migrants from our country, etc., if you want really to solve this problem, the only way to solve this problem is to promote economic development in our country. So it's your own interest. No. And this is why the experience of democracy has failed, and this is why now they are facing this flow of immigrants and complaining about the fact that we have too much immigrants. But it's your fault. You didn't solve the problem. You didn't tackle the very root of the problem. Just tackle the symptom of the problem.
So if these European countries were able to forgive some of Tunisia's debt, restructure the loan payment, you think that would have made a difference in terms of the economic conditions in Tunisia?
But within the framework of stable government, government accepted by all Tunisians, yes, I think we can do a lot. Don't forget that Tunisia is a middle-class society. Tunisians have highly educated young people, and now I see, unfortunately, I have seen so many young people, you know, high-skilled, they're leaving Tunisia and coming to Europe, coming to the United States. You know, Tunisia is a poor country, but Tunisia is sending all the intellectual wealth to the richest country. This is why I'm really very shocked that we, the poor country, we are fueling, you know, the economic development of countries like France, like Italy, etc.
So
nothing in exchange.
So last week we had a seminar that Radwan organized with the great scholar of democracy, Larry Diamond, who reminded us that the way that you challenge an authoritarian regime, the formula is very simple. Unite the opposition, divide the authoritarian regime. So the question to you is, what are the obstacles to uniting the Tunisian opposition today? We all remember in 2015, the Tunisian National Quartet Group won the Nobel Peace Prize for the role that they played in consolidating democracy in Tunisia. Without a united opposition to challenge the current authoritarian ruler, it seems to me that it's very difficult to restore democracy. So from your perspective, what are the obstacles today to bringing about a united opposition in Tunisia among different groups that can challenge the authoritarian rule of Kais Saied?
Since the 90s, I was repeating to everybody in the opposition that the main divide in Tunisia is not between secularists and Islamists, it's between Democrats and anti-democrats. Unfortunately, for some people, the divide is still between Islamists and secularists. And this is the main problem everywhere in the Arab world. Unless we give up this all divided and be convinced that everywhere, at any moment, that the real divide is between Democrats and anti-democrats, it won't work. But I feel that the Egyptian opposition, Syrian opposition, have contact with all the Arab opposition. I see that there is a shift to this new way of thinking of it. And in Tunisia, even in Tunisia, now we have something called Jabhat al-Khalas Front of the South, which is inside this opposition group. You have Islamists and non-Islamists. So I am optimistic. It takes time, but we are heading in the good direction, thanks to the counter-revolution, thanks to the authoritarian regime. Because in fact, look what Said now. He's attacking everybody, Islamists, non-Islamists, everybody is in jail because all of them are against dictatorship. So he's doing his best, you know, to unite us. And thanks to him.
So here's the question, though, that I still don't have a good answer for. What are the sources of support that this authoritarian leader in Tunisia has that allows him to stay in power? He seems to be mentally unstable. He seems to be incoherent. The economy is much worse off now. So how does he continue to stay in power when it's not clear where he's getting his support from? Yes, it's the military, it seems, right? The military is still backing him. But who else?
The military and, well, I have to be frank with you. We didn't do very well when we were in charge of the country. We committed a lot of mistakes. One of them dealing mainly with political issues and not with economic issues, etc. and we have had also some differences within the government. So we have part of responsibility. And in Tunisia, you have this middle class, westernized middle class, which is anti-Islamist. And this guy played, he used this anti-Islamism as, you know, to get the support of this middle class.
Yeah.
But now this middle class, this westernized middle class, is watching very closely that Tunisia is really, you know, collapsing. The economy is collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe that this middle class is now changing its mind, and this could be very interesting for the future. And here comes my role and the role of people like me to say, look, we don't have the most important enemy we have to fight in Tunisia is poverty. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so let's tackle this economic problem and forget about our differences, ideological differences, because in fact, once again, the most important thing is to set up a new democratic state, democratic institution, etc. So he got the support from this middle class, now changing its mind, and probably for the military, because of the military, I'm afraid to say that maybe it's on the break to some relationship with the military of Algeria, or the Emiratis, etc. And those people are extremely dangerous because they have decided that there will never be a democratic state in the region.
Right. So my next question was, you know, looking back over the last 10 years since the revolution, you know, if you could rewind the clock and do things differently, what should have the democratic forces, knowing what we know now, what could they have done differently to prevent authoritarianism from returning to Tunisia? You just said that we should have focused more on economic issues, but can you go a bit deeper? In what way?
Well, there's something I have to add. It's about, you know, I was extremely surprised when I was in charge to see that the very means of the tools of democracy, how easy it was for the counter-revolution to hijack them. Freedom of expression. I have been tried for many times during the 80s and the 90s because we're, myself and many others are fighting for freedom of expression. And suddenly we saw that the freedom of expression, now with the revolution has brought to the country, was used by the enemy of the revolution. You cannot imagine how many TV channels, how many newspaper, etc. Suddenly they appear, and the only objective was to destroy the revolution and to destroy. So in fact, and this is really, I was extremely astonished to see that the tools of democracy was destroying democracy. Same thing for the political parties. So, you know, suddenly we saw people coming from nowhere with millions of dollars, you know, having new political parties and winning more seats in the parliament than my own party, fighting for more than 2 decades for democracy. In fact, we didn't realize that we should have been very cautious about what kind of laws to protect democracy. We didn't do enough, you know, to protect our democracy. And
but what laws could you have promoted, given that when you have democracy, anyone theoretically can take advantage of freedom to say what they want?
Yeah.
So what type of laws could you have implemented to prevent authoritarian forces from using democracy? So what's the answer though?
You know, I, as a human rights activist, I couldn't send any journalist to jail because I am a human rights activist. But really, some journalists needed to go to jail because they are disseminating false news, they are rumors, etc. So I think we should have what we should have is to have a very strict law protecting freedom of expression, but also punishing the false news, etc. I know it's very difficult to have this kind of. And the same thing for political parties. Look, people who, without any experience, just having a lot of money, you know, setting up. I would say political companies and not political parties. They were political companies, you know, setting political companies and winning seats in the parliament and then destroying democracy inside the parliament itself. So this was probably I think my advice to new people, you know, in charge is, look, you have to protect democracy from these people against democracy, but be careful because don't try to don't protect yourself, against any kind of critique because you protect democracy. I know it's very, very difficult
to find the balance, the right balance,
but this balance should be found.
Okay, I'll get to questions in a second. I have to ask you a question because we're in Washington, D.C. About U.S. foreign policy toward the Arab world on the question of democracy. It must be incredibly difficult for you to see politicians in this city who claim to be supporting democracy and claim that when it comes to Ukraine, we are in a global historic struggle between democracy versus autocracy. But when it comes to Tunisia, when it comes to the Arab world, they do the exact opposite. The dictators and the despots of the Arab world are the best friends, not of Trump and the Republicans, of Biden and of Blinken and others. As we speak right now, and as everyone knows in the room, the Biden administration is using all of its political capital to try and create a new political agreement between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and other Arab autocracies. So given the reality of, I'm just talking about, the United States, we know what Europe is doing with its relationship in the Arab world. I'll just cite one example because it's one that I think people should know. 2 years ago, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, invited General El-Sisi to Paris and gave him the Legion of Honor Award for statesmanship and good conduct. And, he quoted the ideals of the Enlightenment. I mean, this is the reality of Western governments. So how do democratic forces in the Arab world in Tunisia respond to this double standard, this gross hypocrisy that we see from liberal democracies who claim that they support democracy and human rights? At least they do in Eastern Europe, but not in the Arab world. How should we engage with these governments given the double standards that they repeatedly demonstrate?
I have heard the State Department spokesman, Ned Price, what he said in January 2023. The parliamentary election that took place in Tunisia represent an essential initial step toward restoring the country's democratic trajectory. My goodness. This is the spokesman. I was saying that the parliamentary election, mock elections, 10% participated to this election, and this guy is saying that the parliamentary election, an essential initial step toward restoring the country's democratic trajectory.
It's exactly the opposite. It's restoring autocracy, not democracy.
And I have also here a lot of.
They were boycotted by 90%.
So there is a huge sort of gap between the reality of what's happening on the ground in Tunisia and in the Arab world and the statements that come out of Western capitals.
I would speak as a politician, as a cynical politician. Forget about idea, everything. What I am, not surprised me, but I would say well done for them, is the fact that when I see the Biden administration or any administration supporting people like Mohammed bin Zayed or Mohammed bin Salman, supporting the Saudi regime and supporting the Emirati regime. In fact, they are supporting what I call the Chinese model of government. They are supporting the Chinese model of the government. And they are promoting, in fact, this kind of regime in the Arab world. So you say that you are fighting against the Chinese influence in the world, that you want to promote democracy, etc., etc. And at the same time, you are doing everything you can do to promote and to disseminate this kind of regime. Really, I don't understand how those people think. I don't see any reason for that. Now come to the European. The European have exactly the same thing. They support our dictatorship from the beginning. And now they are complaining about the fact that they have this migration, the massive migration. And also, I remember I said to Francois Hollande and many people, look, you, by not supporting our democracy, you are weakening your own democracy. Look, you do know that the extreme right, which is anti-democratic in Europe, is fueled by this
Migration.
migration.
Right.
So the more instability we have in our country, the more migrants you have, then this migration would fuel the far right in your country. And the far right of your country is anti-democracy. So in fact, by not supporting our democracy, you are.
So that makes rational sense to most people.
No,
what did he say?
No, this is why I think that this way of doing the Western are harming themselves, not only harming ourselves. Of course, the problem of democracy, I would say frankly, the problem of democracy is that democracy is you have politician for very few, short mandate of 5 years. So every politician here in the West is thinking about short-term benefits.
Right.
Is not thinking about long-term. So, and this is why for Biden administration, it's the most important thing is to sell weapons and to get money from that, etc. And none of my business what happened for the next generation.
Right.
So it's up to you, Western to do something with the government, But what I am sure is that it's counterproductive politically, and it's weakening and harming the very democratic system in the United States, only in Europe.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll go to the audience. And this is a provocative question. I don't believe in this question, but many people in Washington believe what I'm about to ask you. They're saying that, look, Tunisia has an economic problem. Many countries in the Arab world are suffering economically. Why not join with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and strike a normalization agreement with Israel and become part of this new Western, Chinese, Emirati, Israeli, Saudi Belt and Road Initiative? It will produce economic development. It will deal with the problems of youth unemployment. It will solve the underlying economic problems that countries in the Arab world are facing. Your neighbor Morocco has signed a peace deal with Israel, and they are supposedly benefiting economically. Why doesn't Tunisia sign on to that project?
Because we have a public opinion, and the public opinion is totally opposite of. And this is the problem. I think this is why the Westerners are not very happy with our democracy, because when you have a democratic system, you have to take account of the public opinion, and the public opinion in Egypt, even in the Emirati and the Saudi, are against the normalization. All of us we look for the peaceful solution of the problem. I believe that we should reach a peaceful solution of the problem, but for the Arabs, for millions of Arabs, normalization doesn't mean only surrender. Surrender to accept the fact that Palestinians have no rights, that they have to accept an apartheid state, etc. And we have a public opinion saying, no, we don't want our Palestinian brothers to live under apartheid system. We don't want them to be occupied. We don't want them to kill. We support them, and we want peace. Once again, really, we want peace. We don't want any kind of war, any kind of racism. We condemn any kind of anti-Semitism, etc. But we want a peaceful solution, a real solution.
Mm-hmm.
And our public opinion, myself, etc., we are against this kind of thing. And look, you gave us normalization with Israel, and then we give you economic development. I don't believe that it's so simple. We can have normalization and get nothing in exchange. So, for many reasons, I think it's not. No, we are not interested in this kind of.
Let's take some questions. Nuruddin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for sharing with us your thoughts on what they think should be a crisis of democratization in the Arab world rather than crisis of authoritarianism. I agree with you with regard to democracy and democratization. However, I think, the elite that came after 2011 just implemented the neoliberal template or the Washington consensus that impoverished Tunisians under Ben Ali and continue to impoverish them now. So my question, I have a few questions.
Just pick one.
Okay, so
out of respect to everyone in the room.
So to what extent the Arab uprisings that means government that followed the 2011 revolts or revolutions suffered from weak institutions, while failed to address social-economic I would say, inequalities in Tunisia and across the region.
We'll take them one by one and then we'll go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I have also already answered this question. I said that we didn't have enough time to tackle the economic problem. I myself was extremely worried about the fact that we have taken 3 years, to implement the constitution, the political system, and I always say to the government, look, we have to hurry up because otherwise it will be a catastrophe. And this is what happened. But once again, don't forget that during this revolution, we have had terrorist attacks, we have had political murders, etc. We have to face a lot of problems coming from outside the country. So it was not easy. I wouldn't say that it was only our responsibility. I said that part of the responsibility is ours, but not only. It was not only our responsibility.
You had your hand up, and then we'll go to the back of the room. Go ahead. And then you next. Go ahead. And keep your questions as short as possible so we get to the all of it. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Center for Contemporary Studies. Thank you so much for your presentation. My question for you as a foreign member of the opposition, do you think that people in Tunisia see a viable alternative amongst the opposition currently in the modern day to rally around against Qais Said? And coming back to, I'm sorry.
One question. Yeah. So is there a viable opposition that people can rally around? Where is it? What does it look like?
No, the problem of Tunisian people is to say that the alternative of Qais Said could be another, could be the Islamist party. And this is the Qais Said is playing very much about that. Look, it's me, or it could be another. Where we are trying to tell the Tunisian people that no, the alternative would be it is between maintaining this kind of dictatorship which is leading the country to the bankruptcy, etc., or having a new democratic system, or having new democratic government. And I can assure you that we are working very hard, to deny the opposition. So the alternative could be very clear to the country, and that alternative is not another. Another is just part of this alternative, like any political component of the spectrum, but that's all.
Okay. You had your hand up, yeah.
My name is Omar Ahmed. I'm a sophomore in school of foreign service. I have a question for you about China's relationship with Tunisia. So obviously Tunisia is part of the Belt and Road Initiative sweeping North Africa, and China has been building closer relations both with the regime of Qais Said and also the neighbor democracies. So my question for you is, given that Tunisia needs economic restructuring, do you believe that China is going to be the party that will support this? And also, if China does support economic restructuring, which could lead to more favorable conditions for a new revolution, do you believe that China would be on Qais Said's side or on the side of the new revolution if that happens?
China is on the side of the counter-revolution everywhere. Look, this butcher, the Syrian butcher, Assad was received very warmly in China, and China never had any kind of sympathy towards our revolution. So, for us, Chinese regime, the Russian regime, the Iranian regime are probably the worst regime. I feel really that they would do everything to stop any kind of revolution.
Is there any evidence of China supporting Qais Said now?
Tunisia is a very small country for China, and the Chinese are more interested in
the bigger markets,
country, where they can have resources, etc. Right. They're not interested. We have very, very few relationships with economic with China.
Any other questions? Yes, right there. Go ahead.
Stanley Colbert, Georgetown. You may be too hard on the Arab world. This is the nature of revolutions. The democratic movement came out of the Arab Spring. But go back to the American Revolution. We almost had a coup d'etat in 1783. The natural outcome was prevented by George Washington. If you look at the Russian Revolution, initially the provisional government, very democratic. Then what happened? The Chinese Revolution, you see the bust of Sun Yat-sen. Then what happened? This is not so unusual as violent change. We think of it as democratic, but even in other cultures, it leads to authoritarianism.
So the question is, are you being
I-
too critical on the Arab world?
No, I totally agree with you. This is why I said that people saying that the revolution has failed. I always say no. It's the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. It's the process, and I always give the same example, which means that 8 years ago, my father and my grandfather, began the battle against the occupation of France, against the colonial state. It took them eight decades before we got independence. And we are now beginning the same process, to get rid of the internal colonial state, if I say. It will take time, and this is what I'm repeating to the new generation. Look, you have to accept that in the long term, we have to accept that removing this kind of state, change the society takes, I wouldn't say century, but it takes decades. So be patient. Stay, stick to your values and accept that you will have to fight, let's say, for 10 years, 20 years. And this is what I'm saying to the new young generation of new politicians.
Yes, go ahead.
Martin Pimentel, CSIS. I'm interested about this concept of time that you had, and it strikes me that in post-revolutionary context, there's this paradox of time that on the one hand, it takes time to create real change, on the other hand, things need to move. And I know you said earlier that one of the issues with your tenure was that it took so much time to consolidate the constitution and the political processes that you needed, and you want to move quicker. But you look at a case like Libya, one of the issues was that the international community moved too quickly in many respects to implement elections and kind of political processes that the country wasn't prepared for. So my question is, what are the things specifically that slowed down that process in Tunisia, and what could have been done differently?
Slow down what process in particular?
Just slow down the process of consolidating a constitution and sort of political institutions needed to implement it.
I always say that we have had one of the best constitutions in the world, not on the Arab, but in the world. And I'm very, very proud of this constitution, which was abolished by the coup. For the first time in 3,000 years, because we are very old, maybe we're a small country, poor country, but we are a very old country, 3,000 years. The first time in our long history, Tunisian discussed their destiny freely. You cannot imagine how many gathering, how many discussions we have had about this constitution. More than 400 gathering everywhere in the country. People talking like philosopher, speaking like philosopher, discussing like philosopher. Imagine philosopher in the remote countries, in the remote countryside of the hinterland. This was a really very exciting experience. The first time Tunisians were discussing what kind of regime you want. We want presidential regime, we want parliamentary regime, we want what kind of, how can we be sure that we were not, etc., etc. And this, fortunately, it took time. It wasn't easy, to have this kind of discussion in 1 month. We could have, some people told me, why don't you appoint some very professor of law, and they would write down a good constitution, and that would all. And I said, no, this is not the most important thing. It is to have the first kind of debate, participation of the whole population. And this is the only thing that we have gained from this, the making of the constitution. And why I'm deeply worried of the way that all this finished. This guy, this putschist, he wrote himself the constitution. He wrote it like, with a lot of, grammar mistakes and so. And he sent this the text he wrote himself, to the people, and the people, 10% of the population went and say, yes, nobody knew exactly what was inside the constitution. While the first constitution discussed it, it was obvious for everybody, that there are huge differences between presidential regime or the parliamentary regime, and we reached the consensus that it will be something like here in the States, check and balance regime, etc. So I hope that, my hope is that we go back to this constitution. It won't be easy, but we have to do something. Once again, I'm really very, very moved and very proud by the fact that for the first time in our history, we have the whole population discussing its own, what kind of regime, political regime they want. And so I think something would remain of this experience, nothing, everything would be lost.
Okay, good. Let's take a few more questions before we start to wrap it up. You had a question, someone who hasn't raised their hand before. 1, is there any other hands? 2, And if there's a third one, and that'll be the last one. 3. Okay, yeah. So we'll take it in that order. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Who had their hand up first? You, go ahead, yeah.
Your Excellency, thank you for coming down here. My question, to make it brief, what do you think about this block migration with Tunisia that's coming out in the last 2 weeks? So the context is European leaders are in Tunisia to sign this memorandum of understanding. So they basically aiming to curb migration to Europe. In exchange, they're offering 105 million euros to Tunisia for border management and nearly 1 billion in additional loans and financial support amid the country's unprecedented economic crisis. So my question is just your opinion. What do you think about this?
I can tell you that I never felt so ashamed to be Tunisian. I have always been proud to be Tunisian, but for the first time of my life, I felt very ashamed to be Tunisian because of the way that migrants coming from sub-Saharan country were treated in Tunisia. You know, I never thought that Tunisia could be as racist, and the way that they were dealing with this migrant was extremely shocking to me. You know that more than 4,000 people were drawn to the desert and just abandoned in the desert. Some of them are pregnant women, children, etc., etc. And this was because of this political migration. We're going to give you money and stop this migration. No, yes, but how to stop the migration? Throw people to the desert, and this is what this guy had done. And this is something I will never forgive him, because it's a matter of honor, personal honor, and national honor. And this guy is, it's something. I think it's, well, the fault of the European, to give money to this guy to do things like that. And the responsibility of this guy, to do such horrible things. Now, of course, probably would remain what to do, because really we have this, in fact, Tunisia and all the Maghreb region is, like a sandwich between the pressure coming from the sub-Saharan country. This flow will never stop it. And then the pressure from the northern countries saying, you have to stop this. And we are between the two forces, forces from the east and forces from. And the only way that the Europeans think the problem should be solved is to back this dictatorship, other dictatorship, to give them money and to say, do your want, we will see as well, to do everything you want with this guy, kill them if you want, or do everything, but just stop this way. And when I talk to the European leaders, say, look, we need a Marshall Plan for the whole region. We have to accept that it's a huge problem. It's a universal problem that we have to tackle the very roots of the problem and not only the symptom. None of my business. I want you just, I give you some money and you do the bad job and the dirty job.
Okay, question on the floor. Yeah, go ahead. Speak up a bit because there's noise outside the door.
My question is regarding Morocco's deal with the Trump administration to normalize relations with Israel in exchange for official recognition of the Moroccan sovereignty of the Western Sahara. Do you think? Why do you think that Western regimes who say to support democracy would support deals like this? And as a supporter of human rights, how do you view a deal such as this with recognizing Moroccan sovereignty of the Western Sahara?
Well, I think that it's a shame, to link. We are going to help you if you do something. We are going to help you if you accept that. It's a kind of blackmail. I cannot accept it. I do believe that Morocco has the right to be in the Western Sahara, but I don't believe that the fact that they would buy this recognition by the fact that they gave up or they forget that the Palestinian people is suffering. I think it's a shame. It's not acceptable.
Okay, last question before we start to wrap up. Go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you so much for speaking with us. I was just curious what your thoughts are on the role of social media in fighting authoritarianism. Because, in the Arab Arab Springs, it was such an important part, digital media, and bringing awareness to all the injustices that were going on. But there's an argument to be made in the United States that social media is the demise of democracy.
Social media is like electricity. Electricity, you can use it, to have light, and you can use it for torch. So social media is exactly the same. It's you can use it, to freedom of expression, and you can use it, to destroy democracy. And I can assure you that the elections in Tunisia and everywhere, the election now are the half attacks from, Russian hackers, etc. So it's you have to be very, very careful with the. It's a tool, but it's a good tool for Democrats, and it's also a good tool for
Authoritarians.
Yeah. So it's you to use it. It's not good. It's not evil. It depends on the way that you use this tool.
Yeah. Before we end, we have a few minutes left. We are being live streamed on Zoom.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Has anyone posted any questions on Zoom? Grace, maybe just pick one or two, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, a question on Zoom is they're wondering how you think about systems that lead to failure from 2011 to 2019, like economic or social elites or the military. How did those systems act upon democratic forces or activists?
Excuse me, I didn't get the question. What is the specific question?
Yeah, they're asking about the kind of systemic factors that led to failure.
Systemic factors, the elites, the military. I mean, you've already addressed this, but do you want to say anything more about those underlying factors?
The systemic factor is it's really a battle between the new political system and the old political system. We have had this old political system based on the rule of one man or one tribe, one a political party, and the rule of military, etc. This political system is, we have it since the so-called independence, and this political system is fighting for its survival. So he's doing everything, to stop any kind of change, any kind of birth of a new political system, which would be the democratic system, etc. And this old political system is backed by the dictatorship of the world, the Russian, the Chinese, the Emiratis, because also they feel that if any kind of triumph of this new wave of democratization could threaten them. So this is probably the whole picture.
You said, this is the last question, because I want you to say something more about this. When you were speaking last week downtown, you said when you were president, you wrote to President Obama and said the Emirati regime is interfering in our country to undermine democracy. And the Emirati regime is backed by the United States. President Obama, we want you to do something about this. What did he say?
Nothing. I never received any response. And I knew it's probably useless because I saw that the Western government, I have to say that for the Western government, authoritarian regime are much better for their own interest in the short term. But I always say that it's sure that it's in your own interest in the short term, but in the long term, you are weakening your image, you are weakening your own democracy, and you are weakening your own interests because you are supporting the Chinese model regime, and all the Chinese model regime would be against you one day or another.
Okay, well, I know this is a dark time for Tunisia, for the Arab world, but we thank you very much, Dr. Marzouki, for being here to share with you your thoughts on the topic. Thanks for the questions. We have an event this Wednesday on the Saudi-Israeli normalization deal. It's a critique of that deal. It's on our website. Please join us if you have the time. Thank you.